Crystal Tower information, Whiskey 2153 Zulu, wind 060 at 5.
076 Mike Juliet, this is departure radar contact.
Hazardous weather information from Minnesota available on flight service frequency.
You've dialed in the Flying Midwest podcast, connecting aviators from across America's heartland, sharing news, information, and events from around the region.
Calling Nancy 53 on over tower, roger, turn left heading 070, runway 9er, clear for takeoff.
Sit back, relax, and join our crew for some hangar talk as we discuss a wide variety of regional aviation topics.
Archer 71143, flying 5, runway 28 left, quick takeoff, left hand southbound.
And now, from our home at the Anoka County Blaine Airport, our checklist is complete, and we're ready for departure for another episode of the Flying Midwest podcast.
Contact departure on your flight.
What is going on, everyone? Jim here with the Flying Midwest Podcast. So happy you're able to join us. On this episode, we're joined by notable airshow performer Kyle Franklin of Franklin's Flying Circus. He'll talk to us about his family history in aviation and his airshow performance career. And as always, news, information, and events from around the region, with some friendly hangar talk along the way. So strap in and let's take off into another episode of the Flying Midwest Podcast. Welcome everyone to the Flying Midwest Podcast. I am Jim, one of your hosts. I'm joined by Maddie.
Hello.
And Trevor.
Greetings.
How you guys doing tonight?
Tired.
I see that.
Surprisingly tired, but not too bad. I had a couple students cancel on me today, so.
Boo.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? It's okay. I have lots of things to do. I'm recovering. My mom and my sister were just here. They got my place looking gorgeous. So that's
except
exciting,
they left you with an IKEA desk to build.
Okay, it's my desk. I chose to get it and undo it, and then, well, it's been built for a long time, but I chose to tear it down and bring it. I took that risk. It might pay off.
You knew what you're getting yourself into.
Right.
I don't know if I want to feel sorry for you on this.
No, it's okay. I don't deserve pity. However, my place is looking a lot nicer, and it's kind of like quiet.
So it is been a long Labor Day weekend for us. I'm going to start things off, though, with a little bit of a surprise for one of us. Happy birthday, Trevor.
Happy birthday, Trevor.
Don't look so excited.
Yeah,
He's like,
please contain yourself.
Birthdays, grrr.
I didn't do anything to celebrate, so it wasn't even my birthday.
That's not how it works.
Yeah,
Whether you celebrate or not, it's still the day of your birth. It is another trip around the sun.
Here we are, another year older.
You can celebrate with us. You're having a drink with us.
I can't say I'm any bit wiser.
I wasn't going to say it.
What did you do with your whole year, Trevor?
You can't sit here any wiser. What you've been going to school for like the last 12 months, it feels like.
Okay, it's been 8.5 months, Jim.
That's still a long time.
It's still a long time to be in a school.
To be away from family, to be in a trailer. Yes.
Let's celebrate with a drink. How about that? You got your beer. I got my little drink here. Maddie's got probably a lot of vodka in that water bottle she has there. There you go. Boys. Birthday drinks for Trevor. See, we celebrated.
I need something harder.
This is what we have for right now.
I'll take it. I'll accept it.
So what do we have going on in the world of aviation between the three of us?
Scared a crap ton of birds.
You're scaring birds?
You're scared of birds?
I scared a crap ton of birds.
Oh, those are different things. He's not scared of birds. He's scaring the birds, Maddie.
Oh.
Yeah.
That like a scarecrow? I want to hear how Trevor's scaring the birds, though.
300 feet off the deck, going 210 knots.
That'll get their attention.
Down by the river. You got that, Chris Farley?
Yeah, in a tin can down by the river, essentially.
Yep.
Uh-huh. Maddie, how are all the students doing?
They're fine. We're not able to fly a whole lot because it's hot here. It's like 95 every single day. So as soon as it hits like, I don't know, 11, it gets bumpy. And my students are still within their first couple flights. Oh. And so it's like, and they're in class in the morning, which is like, prime time to fly. So
yeah.
we're dealing with that. It's
Is it you that's telling them not to fly, or is it the policies telling them not to fly?
I will not make them fly in turbulence for the first couple flights because it does not do anything for them. They won't get the fundamentals properly if they're flying in turbulence. They won't be able to feel the aircraft and they won't get it. I've already gotten evidence of that. I did that with a student today, and I could feel the regression. It was bad. So
they'll feel something with the aircraft. It's just not the desired intent that you have.
right. They will feel turbulence and frustration.
Hey, Jim, what did you do? Now we talked about our stuff. Why don't you tell us what you did?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, Trevor. Thank you. I went to the 6 Yankee Niner fly-in Sidnaw, Michigan. It is in the middle of the UP. It is in the middle of a whole bunch of trees. And about the only thing, I think, in the middle of this huge mess of trees is this airstrip. I flew into that. I met up with some really cool people, most of whom I hadn't been acquainted with before. So it was an interesting experience. I ran into the one and only Brian Turner. That was a very interesting welcoming that he had. He flew in, he landed, and it's like all of us just like created this welcome committee and went over to his plane. And as he's hopping out of his plane, him and his wife, Erin, like, hey, you need a beer? So here's a beer. Here's a beer. Like, let me get out of the airplane first. So,
My kind of group.
Yeah, so it was a really good time. I was introduced to some people. I met a fellow podcaster out of Minnesota. I'm going to check out his stuff and maybe bring him on at some point in the future if he's interested. A couple of YouTubers were out there. Yeah. In the Pattern is his podcast. I haven't listened to it yet, but
I feel like I've heard of it.
okay.
That would be really cool.
So I'll chat with Brad and see if he's interested in that. But yeah, overall, it was just, as we talk about the greatest parts of aviation is the people, and that's exactly what this was. It was a group of great people. We came together, we hung out, we told stories about aviation, talked about our own experiences.
That sounds like so much fun.
They had the schoolhouse building, and we hung out in there quite a bit too. It's 99 years old. It turns 100 next year, and they're trying to do some renovations to this space. It needs some work. They'll admit that. But we hung out a lot in there too. And then there's this couple, Dale and Leslie, that come every year, and they put on such a spread that any pancake breakfast that we ever talk about in this podcast again will pale in comparison to this thing. It was incredible what they put on. So they had like an oatmeal bar and pancakes and eggs and biscuits and gravy, 3 kinds of bacon.
3 kinds of bacon.
Well, they're just flavored differently. They put on a great spread, and we were all very appreciative. But it sounds like this was their dialed back version of that. Sounds like they put on quite the spread every year. So
wow.
It is quite an interesting airport to get in and out of. It was as advertised. That is for sure the field your instructor warns you about. And it's not 50-foot trees at the end of the runway. It's like 75 or 100. So
short and soft field.
Oh yeah, it was a challenge getting in and out of there. And
how long is the runway?
2,600 feet.
That's not too bad.
With 75-foot trees at the end.
That was the hard part. I'm like, oh god, these trees are a lot higher than I thought they were. So I really had to slip it in, and I felt that I just bounced all over the place once I hit. But it turns out everyone did it. Someone made a comment about, did you find the ramp out there? And apparently I must have, because I went airborne again at one point. No, I don't want to be up here. No.
Okay, was it a grass strip or?
Yes, it's a grass strip.
Wow, I'll confess, I've never landed on a grass strip.
Well, and the only grass strip that I landed on before was Forest Lake in Minnesota, and that was at the time when it was a grass strip, fairly level, well maintained. And this is a strip that for the most part it's used a few times a year for an event like this, and otherwise it's kind of considered like a safety field. They want that airport to be in operation so that as you've got people flying around in this mess of huge pine trees, you've got somewhere that they can land. At any rate, I had a really good time. Camping was cold as hell, but the stars were freaking awesome, and we got the Northern Lights for a little bit Saturday night. So it was a really good time, and I got to play bags with Brian Turner for quite a while. So
who won?
The one game we won because I had a ringer on my team and I didn't realize it. The second time when it was just me and Brian and a couple other guys, it was a little bit more evenly matched, and I lost because I'm not good at this. So.
Wait, do you mean cornhole?
Cornhole, yep.
Oh, okay.
Bigs.
I don't like saying the term
Bags.
cornhole. It feels wrong.
I know it does, but that's the only way. Like that's the only name I know it as.
It's
So
a-
it's like
it's
it's
a
weird,
bag of-
but it's
It's a bag of corn that goes into a hole. I don't
These bags, I joked around like, are these bags filled with other bags, like Ziplocs and like filled with cocaine? Because they felt weird. They weren't your typical. I'm like, what is in here?
okay.
I feel like there's another bag
That's where
in here.
Brian gets all of his stuff from.
He wasn't sniffing the bags, but we did mess with the guys on each of our teams because me and Brian were at the same end and we'd switch colors on the other guys every once in a while, which is really fun to do when they've been drinking and you've been drinking and they're like, wait, I thought we were red. We had a good time though. Should we get to some news?
Yes, please. Hey, I got gas. Don't put that in.
Maddie has gas. Let's hear all about it.
Oh, that's funny.
Avgas, that is. So, after 13 years, there is a fleet-wide STC for 100 octane unleaded aviation fuel, which is G100UL. So that's a mouthful. Yeah, so the FAA finally said, yep, that's cool. So we now have a suitable no lead option for avgas, which is very exciting. However, they are apparently finding trouble with manufacturing, especially in the quantities that would be needed to completely replace 100 low lead. This will come with time. It's taken them 13 years to get approval for this. I'm sure down the road, another 13 years, 100 unleaded is going to be for sure what we have, like only. We won't even see 100 low lead anymore. So
The question that I have with that though is the lead is pretty much used as a preservative. So if you
Right.
let your airplane, hypothetically, if you let your airplane sit for 6 months, does it go bad like the gas in your lawnmower, your snowblower?
it is a good
Ooh,
question.
that's a good question.
Yeah.
For me, I'm gonna stick with 100 low lead until I cannot find it anymore. Only for the fact that I don't trust something that doesn't have as much preservative action. You don't know how long that fuel's been in that tank. You know, when you go to the unattended airports, how long has that fuel been in those tanks? You don't know. How is the stability of that fuel going to impact our long-term sustainability of that fuel? That's my one big question.
From Illinois, there was a skydiving fatality near Ottawa. However, this was during a similar time as a world record attempt, but it was not part of the world record attempt. The name of the victim has not been released yet because they want to notify the family first. But yeah, unfortunately, they were found in a cornfield near Skydive Chicago, which is the company that was doing these skydiving things. Usually the FAA, when investigating accidents like this, they don't go after the company and they don't record deaths having to do with the company. It's mainly, did the person who was skydiving pack their parachute and reserve parachute correctly? That's usually what they investigate.
Sioux City, Iowa. So Iowa Lakes earn the national leading scores in aviation ranking systems. So there's a release that's been published by the Flying magazine. It basically ranks aviation airport management programs across the country, and Iowa Lakes Community College is ranked number 1 for their college programs. It says that there's 5 categories that the magazine uses for determination. One is partners, value, fleet, campus life, and then the facilities in order to rank those colleges. Iowa Lakes scored 41 out of 50. If you want to get into the aviation world and you don't want to pay a pretty penny to go to Embry-Riddle or UND, go to Iowa Lakes Community College. Hey guys, you guys remember what happened on Saturday morning?
I flew with a student and some guy decided to steal a King Air.
Exactly. A 29-year-old man from Mississippi is facing a string of charges, including terrorism, stolen property, when he stole a King Air from his local airport. And he flew around for about 5 hours, threatening he's going to crash into the Walmart over in Tupelo, Mississippi. He ended up running out of fuel, from what I can gather.
I'm ashamed to admit, for a dead stick landing in a King Air, he did pretty darn good.
If that ditch wasn't there, they probably would have been able to fly that sucker out.
Yeah.
So, word to the wise, don't steal airplanes.
So here's the deal on this one, and one of the reasons that I don't know it's worth talking about, I think, is what will be the response to this. because I know we had that incident in Seattle, a couple of years ago at this point. And I'm just curious, what you've got a guy who steals an aircraft, is flying around threatening to crash into stuff. Is there going to be a reaction from the FAA?
Oh, there definitely will be a reaction from the FAA. It's just probably going to be, a knee-jerk reaction, like closing taxiways that lead directly to hangars, because apparently people who steal aircraft cannot taxi them, but they can take off with them.
I don't know yet if he's even a pilot in the first place, but I know that he left a goodbye message on Facebook. Will this spark more conversation about mental health? Will it be something else? It's maybe probably too soon to tell, but certainly something worth keeping an eye on.
I feel like the FAA, this is just going to give more fuel to the FAA's fire about like not doing anything about mental health, and that we just can't have people with mental health near aviation.
Hey, Jim, do we have any cool and exciting events?
We always have cool and exciting events, so let's start talking about those.
Let's indulge. Let's indulge in the events.
Yes, we shall indulge in the events.
Dive in.
We'll start out in Racine, Wisconsin, where EAA Chapter 838 is hosting their September flyout. They'll be flying to Orchard's Landing Apple Farm, located at the Merkel Airport, 3 India Sierra 4. The airport features a 2,900-foot grass runway, which is adjacent to the orchard itself. They'll have apples, honey, apple cider donuts, and many other goods. More information is available on their Facebook event page. Sticking in Wisconsin, the Learn, Build, Fly organization will be hosting the Wausau's first ever Women in Aviation Day. It's hosted by EAA Local Chapter 640 and Learn, Build, Fly. You can check out a World War II B-25 bomber, the Dreamflight STEM shuttle, as well as other static displays and Young Eagle flights, weather permitting. The event will take place at the Wausau Downtown Airport on September 17th from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. Additional information can be found at learnbuildfly.org. If you're looking for a similar event, the Women in Aviation Chapter in Flying Cloud Airport in Minnesota will be hosting their Girls in Aviation Day event on Saturday, September 24th at the Flying Cloud Airport in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. The event will feature a number of aviation schools, resources from the state of Minnesota, and the Metropolitan Airport Commission. They'll also have folks from Angel Flight Central and the Civil Air Patrol to talk about volunteer opportunities in aviation. Many professionals will be available to showcase their aviation careers, so stop on out and check that event out. If you haven't had a chance to check out the United States Air Force Thunderbirds this season, their final show in the Midwest is going to take place at the Frontiers in Flight Air Show at McConnell Air Force Base in Kansas. That event takes place September 24th and 25th as part of the base's open house and air show. Gates for that event will open at 9 a.m. and will close at 5:30 p.m., and admission is free to the public. Additional information is available on frontiersinflight.com. That'll wrap up the events for this episode, but if you have events for future episodes, you can reach out to us on our social media or at our email at flyingmidwestpodcast@gmail.com.
I'm going to be super lame, and I'm not going to be here for this interview. I'm sorry, guys.
So you won't be able to talk with Mr. Franklin's flying circus with us tonight.
No, I'm sorry.
It's okay. We know your priorities lie.
But you guys will have fun without me. Have all the fun for me.
We will.
I will
with
see
pleasure.
you later for the outro.
So I'm really excited to be joined by Kyle Franklin from notably Franklin's Flying Circus. He does a number of air show acts around the country, the most notable of which being his drunken pilot routine, which he performed this year at Oshkosh's AirVenture 22. So we're going to have a little chat with Mr. Franklin. And Maddie, you're going to join us on the backside of the interview.
All right. See y'all on the flip side.
So without further ado, Kyle Franklin.
How are you doing?
Doing good.
Awesome. We are super, super excited to have you.
Well, appreciate the invite.
The way we start all of our episodes, just to kind of break the ice between us guests and kind of just work our way into things, is kind of like a fast five or something like that, where we ask you these 5 questions. Don't have to put a whole lot of thought into it. Just what's your first reaction to it?
Okay.
People sometimes are getting caught up with, this is more stressful than I anticipated it to be. So
Yeah, no,
not the intention.
I got a feeling he's probably gonna ask me questions and be like, "Oh shit, I don't know how to answer."
So I'll start off with these 5 questions. We'll just jump right into them, and you can say pass if you want, but I'm going to give you grief about it.
Okay.
So first question: what's your number one aviation pet peeve?
Oh, aviation pet peeves that they don't teach pilots like they used to anymore. That's getting to
No,
be
they
my
don't.
that's getting to be my biggest pet peeve on stuff is that it's just pilots today get so they're taught.
Coddled.
Yeah, God, it's just they're taught by the numbers only, and it's students teaching students. There's no really good stick and rudder guys out there anymore. And of course, that's I guess another thing I've always said is in aviation, they start you off in a Cessna 150 or something like that. It's like, no, you need to start off in a tailwheel airplane, like either J3, Super Cub, 172, something. You need to start off with tailwheel. And because tailwheel would also make such better pilots, and just them understanding how to control an airplane and truly how to handle it. And that's beginning to be one of my biggest pet peeves in today's world. I go flying with some people, or I get other people come down do some flying with me, and it's just like, I generally don't teach from scratch. I like teaching advanced stick and rudder. And just the pilots out there, and all they know is numbers too. It's like, numbers are important. Don't get me wrong. Numbers are important, and know your numbers of your airplane, stall speed, V&E, all the different things. But that being said,
go deeper.
Yeah. Feeling the airplane, understanding the stick and rudder, and knowing what the airplane's going to do. Because I learned this too from my father on that. One of the stories that I always, when I very first started flying the Waco UPF-7, the mystery ship, when I first started flying it, we didn't have an airplane that was an aerobatic airplane that had dual controls in it. All we had was the Super Cub and the Waco at the time. And so my dad taught me as much as he could in the Cub, but skin, it's Super Cub, doesn't do aerobatics great. And he taught me how to fly the Waco in the back with the Cub as well. Because when it came down to it, it was just a matter of me going and jumping in the Waco, and fingers crossed, hopefully everything goes well. Well, everything went fine for the most part. There is a story in there. But anyways, the main story I'm getting at is whenever I went up and I started working on the flat inverted spin, I knew how to get into the flat inverted spin, but I did not know how to get out of it. So I landed and I asked my dad, I'm like, okay, I know how to get into it, but how do I get out? And he's like, well, well, shit, I don't know. I just do it. And I'm like, I understand that, but I kind of need to know the basics beforehand. Mm-hmm. And so he actually had to get in the airplane, go up and do one, and pay attention to what he was doing to get out of it. And he comes back down and tells me everything. And I figured it out. And this many years later now, I understand where he was coming from on that, because I get people like, well, what are you doing at this? Or what I had someone the other day ask me, well, what's this airplane stall at? I'm like, 0. Airspeed wise, it's going to read 0. So don't worry about airspeed. Just feel the airplane. It'll talk to you before it's going to stall. And some people, they just don't understand that. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves in aviation, is just we're trying to get pilots, especially now with the airline industry needing pilots and everything. They're just trying to bang these pilots out like crazy. And it's just like, I'd still rather have a decent, much better stick and rudder guy flying than one that's a good computer programmer, which unfortunately, and I know I'll probably get backlash for this, but that's the way I feel most airline pilots are today. They're all computer programmers. You get in there, you program in the FMS, and,
hit enter and you go.
Yeah. And I mean, half the time they don't even have to taxi out there. Even the computer can do that. And at most it's taxi out, throttles forward, then gear up, autopilot on until you're 50 feet off the deck, ready for landing.
Next question.
Uh-oh.
Most memorable aviator that you've met?
Oh, most memorable. Ooh, that is a good one. I
bring the hard questions, so.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that one is a hard one for me, because I've been very fortunate to have met a lot of amazing pilots in all their own right. Depends on what you look for. Almost hands down for me would obviously be my father, considering he's the one that taught me so much about flying and aviation, airshow world, and even the showman factor that I still push pretty hard in the airshow industry and everything. I love the showmanship part of this. The entertaining is the main thing I enjoy more than anything about it in flying air shows is as long as people are entertained at what I'm doing, I'm happy. Bob Hoover, growing up around Bob Hoover, he's a legend in this world, in the aviation world as a whole. I mean, he was great on there. I mean, knew Bob, didn't do a ton of flying with him or anything there. I think by the time he retired, I was in my late teens, but still got to grow up with him, learn some things. Jim Leroy was a good one. I got to fly with Jim Leroy a lot. Boy, he was an amazing aerobatic pilot. In my book, he's still one of the best Pitts pilots there's ever been. Those three, hands down, I would probably be some of the major ones. But again, learned things from Bobby Yunkin. Again, there's been a real benefit growing up in the air show industry.
Love it. There's some pretty good names in that list. Next question is, what's your favorite aviation related movie?
Let's see. Well, what I appreciate the most, but never can watch all the way through, of course, is The Right Stuff. That was always that was always a fun one for me. I always really enjoy that because I grew up loving space and wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid, all those different things. So yeah, those were that was good. But of course, everybody on the planet answer is going to be Top Gun too. That was always even back then, even when I was 6-7 years old, when it first came out, I knew this was not, this is not realistic. I knew it was hokey. My father was actually doing some movies at the time, and I learned very quickly about Hollywood special effects and things they do in post. So I knew most of it, but I mean, Top Gun was just such a great feel good, between the music, the flying scenes, the egos, and everything involved with it. It's like, well, it's Americana. Yeah, that is the American fly movie. I talk about one of my least favorite ones, and which one was this? The Fast and the Furious 6. Which one's the one with this? They've got the giant C5 that's running down the runway, and they've got the cars.
I haven't watched many of those movies, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's either 6. I'm pretty sure it's 6. In the scene in that movie, they like a C5's getting ready to take off, and they get out there on the runway with the cars, and they're chasing after it. Well, this whole sequence takes about 30 minutes to go through this whole thing. And at the end of this, and then of course at the very end, the airplane crashes right at the end of the runway. And I'm thinking, how long was this runway? I mean, I understand the movie works and everything, but even at that, how long was this runway? And I started trying to do the math on it. I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm sure some other geek online's probably right there. And I looked it up, and someone did the math, and it was the runway would have needed to be 27 miles long, 27.
Wow.
Jesus.
Yeah, that's one of my ones where it's like, why is it every time Hollywood gets airplanes involved, like all logic just goes right out the window? I mean, again, I understand movies. As long as you keep it marginally believable, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
But when you get completely out in orbit with common sense, I'm like, all right, I'm out.
Next question in our Fast 5. What's your favorite air show venue?
That's kind of a hard one. It depends on the year, but normally one of our favorite shows right now has been the Battle Creek Balloon Festival and Air Show in Battle Creek, Michigan, because they took an air show and they expanded on it drastically. They've got a whole carnival there, amusement rides, and every year they change it up some. I've seen them out where they have what do they call it, dock diving or something like that, where they got the dogs running down the deck.
Oh, sure.
In the water. They had that at the air show. They had cars doing drag races out on the runway prior to the air show starting, and they think outside the box. They go to where they're not just entertaining aviation people, they're entertaining everybody that comes. So whether you like airplanes or not, there's something there for you, and that's something that the air show world has been very slow over the years to finally figure out. They think, well, this is an air show, it needs to be just airplanes. It's like, yes, but not everybody likes airplanes.
Right.
It's so have something there to draw more people out, support your air show, but also have something else. It's like some people are against jet trucks at air shows. They think that should not be at an air show because it has nothing to do with airplanes. It's like, well, one, it may not necessarily fly, but it has jet engines on it.
Yeah.
That are part of it. So I think that qualifies it to be at an air show because it's got jet engines on it. But
or what about the bus with the runway? So you land the Cub on top of it, whatever that one is. The bus doesn't have anything to do with aviation, other than it's got a runway on top of it.
Exactly. So I mean, I still think, I like just thinking outside the box on those things and having something to entertain everybody, because that's the way I also think when I'm trying to put a new act together or coming up with something new. I try to find something that everybody across, from children all the way to the old diehard aviation people, I want something in the act that everybody will like. I always try to find something that's going to entertain everybody in some form of fashion. And so when air shows go to that level where they have a good variety of different acts, it's not the same old monoplane over and over and over again, no disrespect to the monoplane guys, but that's becoming the main thing in the air show industry. Vero Beach, Florida was another one this year that was really, really good. That they go all out on their spectator layouts and everything for their spectators and the show. It's just, I can definitely see when shows put effort into it. That's on that extreme of it. Other extreme is I like the small town little show where there's 4 performers, a town of 1,000, 2,000 people, and they come out and feels like an air show from the 1950s or 60s. Those are also my favorite ones. And unfortunately, with a lot of the new rules and regulations that the FAA and the International Council of Air Shows are putting into effect, they're steadily killing the small town shows. And so I'm very saddened to see that happen. We're trying to make some headway in saving a few more of those shows, but it's just things in this world are getting too expensive and too complicated to where the small town shows just can't afford or can't do what all they need to do. And sadly seeing a lot of the small town shows go away.
Last one I got for you in our quick intro section.
Yeah, that's why I meant to warn you guys. I can talk for a long time. I got lots of different stories between my dad's stories, my uncle's stories, my stories. There's over 50 years of Franklin history here, so I know most of it. So yeah, I got lots of different stories I can tell.
The last question. You can't answer Kyle Franklin. That's not going to be an acceptable answer to this question. Okay. Who is your favorite current air show performer? And I know I would want to say Kyle Franklin, but I'm not you. So
current favorite. Wow. Started 2020. It was the Twin Tigers aerobatic team, Big Mark and Little Mark. Everything they were doing was phenomenal. But then we lost Little Mark at the beginning of the 2020 season there. So 2020 in general. Let's see, who's my favorite out there. I would actually have to say the one that's impressing me the most, I'm a full-on entertainment guy. Good stick out there. There's lots of great aerobatic pilots, but as a whole and everything, and always on the cuffs of coming up with something different and that I can relate more to it, I would say Nathan Hammond with his super achievements with Ghost Rider air shows.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, his night show and the level he takes his night show and his day show for that matter is just unbelievable in my book, and just how great and how much thought he has put into all these things. And his skywriting. He's the best skyrider I've ever seen, and I don't mean any disrespect to any of the past skywriters, but it just Nathan, he goes above and beyond in everything he does in the air show industry.
That's going to do it for our first intro questions. So we're going to work into just, the actual, I've been saying meat and potato of the episode, the last 4 or 5 episodes. So I need to find a better word, but
the main course.
The main course. Okay.
Keep it food related, right?
There you go.
Into the main course. It just sounds so cheesy, but I'm going to probably use it.
So where are you from?
Originally, I'm out of Ruidoso, New Mexico is where I'm originally from. Grew up there, graduated. All my family's originally out of there. My Of course, my father was out of Lovington, New Mexico. My mom was originally from Las Cruces, New Mexico. So,
That's a
and
beautiful area
most,
there.
and most of my family still lives out there. So, because my grandfather was actually a farmer and a rancher, and the farm and the ranch were 30 miles apart. And that's how my dad learned to fly, was sitting on his lap, going back and forth between the farm and the ranch.
Okay.
Yeah, because my grandfather, he used an airplane like most people do a pickup truck. I mean, it was just another piece of farm equipment, because he was actually a self-taught pilot when he was 16. And since then, since then, after that, airplane just became a normal piece of thing, and way he always traveled.
You talked about your grandfather being the one using the aviation outlet as a tool in the toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
That really where it started from, or were there other influences?
Well, let me put it this way: from the start, I was born into aviation. Between my grandfather, I mean, I was 2 weeks old first time I went in an airplane with my father. He had to go somewhere, and they threw the car seat. I think it was in the back of it. I can't remember if it was the Viking or if it was the Cub. But anyways, I was 2 weeks old first time I went in the airplane. Actually grew up, or spent the first 4 or 5 years of my life in a hangar home. We had a hangar on a private field type thing. And so it had a glass door that looked out into the hangar, and we had the Aerostar and the Waco and the Cub, and different airplanes in there. And so that was a big influence on me. And then of course, just my grandfather flying airplanes all the time. Whenever I'd go to Lovington, my grandfather and grandmother, they actually ran the Lovington Airport, which is now named after him.
Nice.
But I grew up on that Lovington Airport, riding my bicycle on the ramp, and then go with my grandfather, and we'd fly to the farm, and then we'd fly out to the ranch. He still was a beef rancher out there, and we'd go out there and fly out to the ranch, and then jump in the old vehicles, go out and check all the troughs and feed all the cattle. And anyways, but airplanes were always just a big part of my life. And honestly, I don't think I have a single picture hardly that doesn't have an airplane in the background. And so to me, airplanes were just it was just something that was always there. And I grew up with it. And of course, as I was growing up too, when my dad developed the act called ZAR, which was done in a twin engine Aerostar, it was one of the few aerobatic twin engine aerobatic acts that there's been in the airshow industry. Whenever he was developing that, he got the idea for it after watching the Empire Strikes Back. After Star Wars came out. After Star Wars came out, he realized this is going to be really popular, and what can I do to try to, capitalize on this and maybe try to make a little money in the airshow industry? Because as a lot of people have heard me say, with the airshow industry, it's a hard way to make an easy living. Because this is what I do full time for a living, and the flying's the easy part and the fun part, but all the other stuff in between, not so much.
Oh yeah.
But of course, when my dad started developing up the ZAR Act, I was 4 years old, and he was developing the act up as a space age character, and he was going to focus it primarily towards kids, and I was the guinea pig. He was like, "Hey, Kyle, what do you think? You like this, And he used me to generate other ideas for the act, and being a part of that in such a young age, that really got me really started influencing more on the showmanship factor. And even, my father, he's airshow pilot. Yeah. But he's also playing this comic book character. And I don't know, that all had a real impression. It made a real found impression on me.
It's cemented your future as a airshow pilot.
Yeah, well, it kind of did. That was, I never really, since I grew up in this business, I didn't know whether I was really going to be a full-time airshow pilot or not. My dad never pushed me towards being an airshow pilot. In fact, he always figured I'd go and do something else with cars, which I do a lot of stuff with cars too. But the airshow industry, because I have been in it so long and I grew up around it, I just can't imagine not doing it. It's part of who I am now. I have my father to thank for a lot of that, a lot of the knowledge and of course the equipment to continue on doing this. My uncle was a captain for Southwest Airlines. He flew for Southwest for over 40 years, did air shows as well. He did Actually, he did his official solo on his 16th birthday was an air show performance at Lovington.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
Because my uncle actually soloed when he was 11. My dad soloed when he was 12. So they grew up with this. They grew up with the airplanes as well. And that's actually how, I'm back up here. I'm kind of bouncing around on my stories. But that's actually how, one of the ways my father learned to fly and built a lot of time was he was home alone when he was 12 years old. He was home alone and got bored and decided to go out and fly. And so he went and he was a pretty small guy at the time. And he went and pushed the family PA-14 family cruiser, pushed the PA-14 out of the hangar. And he was just able to get it out enough to clear the prop. And started up, went out and flew around and buzzed the neighbor's house and everything. And he came back in and landed and pulled up to the hangar, but he realized that it was too small. He wasn't going to be able to get the airplane back in the hangar. So he knew he was going to get caught. And about that time, the phone rings and he goes in and answers the phone, and it's his dad. And he's like, well, you get all your chores done? It's like, yes, sir, got my chores done. It's like, well, what you been doing? Well, I've been flying. And at the time, my dad also did RC models and different things at that. And my grandfather asked, like, well, that's good. What airplane you been flying? Yours? Say what? Like, well, I've been flying your airplane. And he said there was kind of a long pause there, and said, well, okay, but don't go up anymore until I get there. And so he anyways, he got back and of course stopped by the neighbor's house on the way back out to the farm there and saying, well, what are you doing here? I just saw your airplane flying around a little while ago. It's like, yeah, that's what I'm going to go find out about. So anyway, it went back, and my grandfather thought about it for about a week or so and, talked with my dad about it. It's like, well, one of his sayings, my grandfather always asked him, well, did your knees knock whenever you went to go fly by yourself? He's like, no, my knees didn't knock. The only thing I could see different is with you in it, and with you out of it, it flew a whole lot better without you in it.
That's awesome.
So anyways, after my grandfather mulling that over for about a week or so, they just added another chore to my father's daily chores when he got home and got off the school bus. Is they put a feed hopper in the back of the PA-14 and had the little grain cubes they used to feed cattle. And so put a feed hopper in the back of the PA-14, and my dad at 12 years old would get off the school bus, the airplane already be loaded and ready to go, and he'd jump in the PA-14, fly the 30 miles out to the ranch, and then find the cattle and start dumping the feed out of the back of the airplane. And that's how my father started building time in the airplane when he was 12 years old, was feeding the cattle. And the only downside about all of that was that they found that after feeding the cattle that way for a while, anytime any airplane would fly over the ranch, cattle would start chasing the airplane. They realized that's where the food comes from, so they got to the point they would chase any airplane that flew over the ranch. But
that's awesome.
But yeah, that's kind of the story of how my father started building his time. Because for my father, and let's say we can go a little bit there, 12 years old was the pivoting point in his life. At 12 years old, he soloed himself while he was home alone. He went to his first air show as a spectator and saw Harold Cryer and Charlie Hillard perform, and made the decision right then that he wanted to be an air show pilot. And after he got back from that air show, he bought an antique airplane magazine, and the centerfold of that magazine was a 1940 Waco UPF-7. And he just thought that was the coolest looking airplane he had ever seen. And he ended up taking that out and putting it up on his wall. And
a real angel in the centerfold, huh?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And as his mom eventually took it down and had it framed for him. Well, jump ahead a couple of years. So he's 18. Him and his father was in Southwest Texas and at an air show as spectators. And as they were getting ready to leave, my dad noticed his airplane and open T hangar in the back, and that looks kind of familiar. And went over there, and it's a 1940 Waco UPF-7. Actually, it is the N number. The N number, it is the airplane that he had hanging on his wall in that
Wow.
centerfold, which was November 2369 Quebec. They ended up buying it on the spot for $4,500. My father jumped in it and taxied it around, figured it out, everything. And they jumped in with both airplanes, flew it home. And the very next year, my father started doing air shows in a stock Waka UPS-7. And that airplane, 2369 Quebec, is the airplane that eventually became the Jet Waka. So
Wow.
kind of a full circle.
Wow.
That is the airplane he started off with, and that is the airplane he died in. So it was kind of a neat thing there. And the 12 years old was a pivoting point in my father's life where he knew that he was going to do there. Me, on the other hand, I've always had a lot of different interests. Again, flying was, I got to flying very young, but by the time I hit teenager, I got into girls and motorcycles and a bunch of other things, and flying was always there, but flying was always kind of on the backside. And again, a lot of the things I learned flying, I was told the first time I actually had a CFI look at my logbook that I've been keeping since I was 10 years old, actually a little earlier than that, about 8 years old. Anyways, he looked through, it's like, oh, this is very cool, but you technically need to lose this logbook because having things in here about flying underneath power lines with fences and landing on highways is not something you need to have in your book. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that book went away, started a new logbook. But no, I did a lot of flying, but of course, I started traveling with my father on the road when I was 12 years old, and basically every summer from then on, I was traveling with him on the road doing air shows. From basically as soon as I finished up my last final in school, I was on an airline to meet up wherever he was. Would go the entire summer with him and airline back in about a week before school started.
Nice.
And I spent every summer with him, and learned a lot from him. And then, of course, when I was 17, I started wing walking for him. The wing walker we had, the beginning of the season, he just kind of up and quit. He just decided he was done with air show, or done with the wing walking bit, didn't want to do it anymore. And my father had a full season booked, and there's not that many wing walkers out there. We were able to get Todd Green to fill in a few slots there in the beginning. And granted, I was 17 at the time, and I told him, like, well, I'm already trained. I had been trained, of course, growing up. I was always imitating the wing walkers as a kid. And by the time when I was 14, I went for my first wing walk on the outside of the airplane, got up. All it was I just crawled up onto the top wing, strapped in. We did some basic aerobatics, and then I crawled back down into the front cockpit, and kind of a been there, done that, thing. It was something I always wanted to do, was just try wing walking. And anyways, yeah, when he needed someone to fill that season, I told him, like, well, I'll do it for this season until we find, we get someone else trained and get someone else to do it. And then next thing I know, 8 years later, I was still wing walking. So wing walking took up a big chunk of my air show career. And then I did start flying. I started flying the comedy routine that everybody knows. I started flying that when I was about 20 years old when I started flying that one. And, do that at a few shows, primarily still wing walking. But that's how a lot of my stuff got started too.
That's
so
pretty cool.
Yeah, lots of different stories there.
So in that 8 years that you're doing the wing walking, did you know that you're going to continue on performing at that point, or was there a certain turning point where you're like, this is what I'm going to keep doing?
When I was 17 and I started doing it, granted, I was a sophomore in high school, and that was a fun job. I was already traveling with my dad every summer, and beat working at McDonald's as a summer job. So, So I was doing the wing walking, and I think, what was it? I was doing the wing walking all the way up until either 2000 or 2001, somewhere around there. And I'd done it plenty, and I was ready to do something else. I wanted to go back to school. So we had, and lo and behold, had a girl come in that wanted to learn some more on wing walking, and she wanted to take over. And I thought, great, this will work out perfect. She can take over, and then I can go back to school. So she traveled with us for 1 year there, and she traveled with us first half of the season. learning everything. And then the last half of the season, my dad and her went off doing that, and I went back to school and did that all through the start of the next year. And then unfortunately things didn't work out. So I only got about 2 semesters in before the things didn't work out with the wing walker. And so I stepped back in. I really didn't want to, but I stepped back in to do the wing walking bit and decided, you know what, I'm just going to stick with this for a while. And started flying some air shows in the Waco mystery ship, because we were flying the jet Waco at the time. And started doing a few shows with the mystery ship. Still, wing walking was my primary. And then in 2005, when my dad and Bobby Yunkin collided, and that kind of put the end to my wing walking career. I was from the start, I was too big to be a wing walker anyways. Again, the only reason I started wing walking professionally was kind of out of necessity at the time. And to be perfectly honest, I did really enjoyed the wing walking, and I enjoyed the different aspects that I brought to it, with all different tricks we'd come up with, different ideas. But I got some other interesting stories. Like the first time we ever did a snap roll with me out on the wing, on the top wing, not a big deal. I'm strapped in, not a big deal. But when I'm down in between the wings doing a snap roll out there's a lot more force out there. It's trying to sling me off the wing more. And flat out, my dad just forgot I was out there and pulled it into a snap roll. And I held on real tight. And since that worked, I was like, okay, continue. Since you forgot about me, but it worked, let's just continue doing that. So anyways, we came up with different ideas. But after he passed, at the time I was still dating Bobby Yunkin's daughter, Amanda. And we ended up getting married the next year. And that was one of the questions that, we kind of sat down and had a discussion about us. Are we going to stay in this air show mess, or are we going to do something else? Because air shows are a love-hate relationship, as with most jobs. Certain things about it you love, other things you don't. And anyways, we had a long discussion about whether we're going to stay in this business or get out, and we decided to stay in it. And so if I'm going to stay in it, I'm going all in. So
sure,
I've been doing it ever
Here
since.
you are.
Yeah, here I am, still doing it. Don't get me wrong, I got some other ideas of things I'd like to try, and I've come real close to doing them, but things don't always work out like you hope. So, but no, the air show, I've got a new act I'm working on. If I can find the right airplane, I know the airplane I want, and if I can find it, I think this act will go over really well. But with the state of the economy, the country, the world, and everything right now, I'm just kind of like, I'm not trying real hard to find the airplane, but if the airplane pops up, I'll get it. But until then, I don't know when the act's actually I don't know when I'm gonna have it together, because I'm just kind of waiting to see where things go first.
You need that same moment your dad had, where the plane just appears before him and like we're buying it on the spot. That's what you need.
Hey, Maddie, welcome back.
Thanks, Trevor. Good to be back.
You missed our conversation.
I'm aware.
She knows.
I was working.
So what I hear you say is you're going to have to listen to Kyle Franklin when the episode gets released.
Yes, I will listen to that one. I promise.
So fun story. The interview, you may notice, was cut a little abruptly. There is so much content that we were able to get from Kyle, just the stories he has, the experiences he's had, that we're going to split it into 2 episodes for the sake of time. We typically like to try to keep the episodes around an hour long for the listening pleasure of our audience. So what we'll do is we're going to have a special episode later this week, the week of the September 12th, where we will put out the second part of that interview with Kyle. The second part of the interview is going to showcase him talking about the actual show itself that he puts together, the work he does in the aircraft during the show, as well as how much work he has to still put into things with maintenance when he's not in the aircraft performing.
Well, that'll be fun.
Yeah. And I enjoyed listening to him talk about just the family history of how he got into this in the first place. That was really entertaining.
I can't wait to hear it.
I can't imagine stealing my parents' airplane.
At 12 years old, I think the family history of it is really cool, just how far back aviation goes in the blood of his family. That covers that part. Now do we want to cover Super Aero?
Hey, Jim.
Yes, Trevor.
Who's Super Aero?
I'm glad you asked. Ryan Dabrowski is a YouTuber out of the state of Wisconsin, or as you like to call it.
Wisconsin.
That's correct.
He's land, as my dad says.
He is the host of Super Arrow Live, where he brings on numerous guests on YouTube Lives. And we are going to do a dual interview with him on his channel, likely on September 14th. So I will be posting additional information on our social media pages to let you know when that's happening. But we're basically just going to go back and forth where he'll interview us and we'll interview him. And we're just going to do like dueling interview questions until we have a winner.
Skull Vikings.
What?
Oh dear.
Yeah,
this is already going up to a great start.
The Vikings just won, so we'll be sure to bring that up.
Does Kansas even have a football team? Hold on.
Maddie.
What? Kansas football.
Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, but is it Kansas City, Missouri, or Kansas City?
It's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
They're two different states.
Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas are two separate cities, as is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan being a part of Michigan, not just an extension of Wisconsin.
It should be an extension. It is Wisconsin.
Yeah, and as I told Brian Turner at Sidnaw, that the fact that the Wisconsinites have not taken back the Upper Peninsula tells me everything I need to know about that state.
Yep.
Amen to that.
Yep.
The UP is yours for the taking, Wisconsin. All right, Maddie, how do people follow us and get to know where we're at?
Follow us on Instagram, like our page on Facebook.
Or you can contact us on our email at flyingmidwestpodcast@gmail.com. If you have ideas for future shows or want to be a guest, certainly reach out to us. We'd love to have you.
Oh, also, we have really cool merch. So if you want to support us and also rep the podcast, because we're kind of cool and we have a neat looking logo, definitely look on our website. We've got our merch there. Got coffee cups, hats, mugs. Wait, shoot. Crap.
Shirts. We have shirts.
Shirts. That's the word I was looking for. We've got shirts, etc.
That's all available on our website, flyingmidwest.com/merch.
Merch.
Merch.
All right, boys. I know you guys had more fun than me because you got to talk with Mr. Franklin and everything.
We did.
However, I did have fun on this podcast.
We're glad.
Did you guys have fun?
I think we talked about that already. Of course we did. We got to talk to Kyle Franklin.
I'm just making sure.
We had a blast.
Good.
Gosh. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the podcast.
Until next time.
See ya.
See ya.
See ya.
Flight 536, contact Minneapolis Center 132.35 today.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Flying Midwest podcast. Until next time, podcast service terminated, squawk VFR, frequency change approved. Good day.
Even then, Maddie may be a CFI, but she's not your CFI. Please consult your CFI before doing any of the stupid shenanigans we tell you to do. Especially if it's for me and Trevor.
Oh, please put that
Oh, that's going in there somewhere.
that has to be at the end. That has to be our concluding thought.
As soon as I get my check ride, I'm pulling shots. I'm getting the bleep out of here.
That's understandable. You've been living in a trailer for 8 months, so
I really appreciate how you censored yourself.
You
It's a
appreciate that?
family-friendly podcast.
I thought it was
He
funny.
understands and respects that. Thank you, Trevor, for doing that.
I'm off my soapbox now.
Yeah,
I'm
get
not
down.
trying. I'm not
You're
trying
gonna find
to
another soapbox to get on, so it's okay.
We all do.
Isn't being on a podcast just laying on a soapbox, being listen to me for an hour?
Well, it's not, because we bring other
No.
people in for them to listen to for half of that hour.
So we bring them onto our soapbox.
Yeah, come up to our soapbox, get cozy, and share your unpopular opinions.
I am safe. I taught a student about the I'm safe checklist today.
Unrelated note, at the fly-in I was at, we were talking about the maneuver someone had done as they did their low pass that you're supposed to do before you land at this airport. Someone had said, what part of the I am safe checklist is that on? And I said, the E for eh.
E for eh. That's, I feel that right here, I feel a lot.
The Flying Midwest Podcast is not your CFI. Please don't take that bit seriously.
We're the Midwest Flying Podcast.
Yes. And
Not
we
the
talk
Midwest.
about Midwest
That's-
content.
That's not the name of our
Flying Midwest
podcast.
Flying Midwest Podcast.
For those of you listening at home, if you thought you heard my eyes roll, you did.
And that's a tornado.
Where?
Where?
Don't say that to Maddie. She's in Kansas. It could be anywhere around any corner.
Also
anytime.
experienced an earthquake today. I was standing on some suspended
why?
stairs.
It's because she had
Stop!
Actually,
Worst.
I thought it was from my landings at Sidnaw.
Probably they're so bad we felt them halfway across the country.
hang on. I got something brewing, so it's not gas.
I was gonna make the joke. Damn it.
All right, straight face.
There are some strong feelings about other people in this this podcast right now.
Sorry, is this the first time you've listened?
Clearly. I'm not here often, apparently.
Well played, Jim. Well
Yeah.
played.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Hey, I got gas